Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start this whole new series here based on your new suggestions. I have seen a bunch of them come in, so please go ahead and continue to post them. I'm going to talk about these in the next coming weeks. Looking forward to seeing those suggestions soon. This one immediately grabbed my attention because of the name associated with it. Interestingly enough, I believe I found the actual cryptid that's tied to the name. Maybe. I may still be wrong. And if so, somebody please post it in the comments below. But I found something that matches it very, very closely. Very unique situation. I haven't really run into this before, but I think this could be the case. But it has to do with another cryptid that's found in the Philippines, in the Filipino culture. I've mentioned a bunch of those in the past too. And it has a very interesting trait that ties into the name. In fact, you're looking at a representation of it now. The official name is known as the Berbalang, but it's colloquially known as the Gravedigger. You can see exactly why, right? I wanted to talk about this creature because of a name like that. So let's go ahead and let's talk about it here, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it too. So what is this Berbalang / Gravedigger? Well, again, it's a creature that's found in the Philippines. It's part of their culture. It gives you an idea essentially of how long it's been there. It's also a mythical creature that is seen, but it tends to have very short sightings. So in other words, all these years that it's been around, people to this day still don't have much description for it. And this is why there seems to be a huge amount of different versions of how this creature looks like. But to give it some universal trait, I'll mention at least some of the most common sightings, and that's this. First, you take your average humanoid, so something that is, again, looking like a human but not quite, and then you mix in something along the lines of a vampire, something having also very large bat-like wings, something potentially having either also the face of a bear or the face of a dog, and then most uniquely having very strong slanted eyes, and that's essentially what you have here. You have the Berbalang / Gravedigger. And the reason why it's called the Gravedigger, obviously if that doesn't give you a hint right up front, it's because this is a thing that loves to dig up graves. Its delicacy is eating on corpses. Gives you an idea of what kind of graves it focuses on too, right? Because if this was something involving a grave that's like 100 years old, there's nothing there. It's just pure bones at that point. But anything involving corpses, recently, let's say, placed into the ground, buried ones, that's the ones that it seems to focus on too. And then to give you an idea of essentially how long it's been around, there was one of the first written ones happened from a journal, a book that was called Oddities by Robert T. Good. There it was a description of an encounter of a Berbalang. Now the book was written in 1928, but the encounter was in 1896. There was an organization called the Asiatic Society of Bengal, and there was a gentleman there named Mr. Ethelbert Forbes Sketcherly, originally from Hong Kong. He, in turn, was able to talk to some of the inhabitants of a small village, and this is what they told him. They told him that they owed their allegiance to these things, these people that they called Berbalangs. In fact, they also considered them to be ghouls. They knew that these things feed on human flesh, particularly those corpses that I was mentioning earlier, but it's very easy to discern them from anything else. Besides those features that I was mentioning as well, about the wings and then also the humanoid appearance, those eyes are the biggest indication. These eyes are not round, but are instead purposefully slanted, almost like in this case of a cat, if the cat itself was, let's say, halfway closing its eyes. Obviously, cats have those big bulbous eyes, but whenever they're almost closing their eyes, they look a little different. And so that's essentially what these Berbalangs have as well. But yes, indeed, they described how these Berbalangs love digging open graves and then eating on the corpses, particularly on the entrails. The only issue, though, is that the supply there is limited. I mean, how many people can die each day, right? And then especially those corpses staying fresh. Fresh, in other words, for these gravediggers to be able to eat. So that's when this thing apparently takes on another characteristic. This places it actually into a very frightful stance. You don't want to come across this thing whenever it goes into its second mode. Apparently, then it can go into an area where if it goes to a hidden place, and this is where it gets a little strange, but hear me out. If it goes to a hidden place, holds their breaths, and then it turns into into a trance, then their bodies turn astral. So it allows it to basically be outside of its body, whatever form that is. And as they fly, they can now make their way into the homes of the living people. And then that's when it essentially starts to feed on their entrails. Scary stuff when you think about that, because there's very little control that one would have when it comes to that. Luckily, though, there's some indications as to when a Berbalang is around. Number one has to do with the noise that it makes. If it's far away, it has a loud moaning noise. In fact, it can be heard far from the distance. But the closer it gets to someone, that's when it starts going into a lower moan, what's described as a feeble moan. It kind of makes sense because it's almost trying to go into a stealth mode, right? It's not going to necessarily make that loud noise from a close distance, otherwise it'll give its location away. Also, those wings, even though they're pretty much silent most of the time, you can still hear the flapping of the wings. And then those large slant-like eyes that I was mentioning earlier are another dead indicator. Apparently, these things will catch the light, just like most other nocturnal animals will, in the right way. When that happens, then it's almost like their eyes go into a quote-unquote dancing firefly mode. So you'll definitely have a good indicator of what this creature is nearby if you see those type of eyes as well. And then if you wanted to try to get this thing away from you to make sure that you're not attacked by this Berbalang, there's several ways to do so. One is if you possess coconut pearl and I guess you have that around you, or if you have it in your home, then you're good, you're safe. But the other way is you have to carry what's called a kris. And all this is, it sounds fancy, but all it is essentially taking a blade and rubbing it in the juice of some lime. And so that way, whenever this thing is near and around you and you have that coated limed knife there in your possession, then apparently this lime causes it great damage. Who knows why? Who knows why it's so allergic to it? But yeah, that's another way to keep yourself safe. And then yet another way that this thing is trying to trick you, but at the same time you can get away from it, is that moaning I was mentioning earlier. If you hear it any direction, let's say it's to your left, then you want to go to your right because it's trying to deceive you. If you go the opposite direction, then you're safe. But otherwise, if it's in front of you, like if you hear that moan, go backwards. If it's to the right, go to the left, and so on. And then this Berbalang will not be able to catch you at that point. But that's pretty much it. That's all the information that I could find associated with this Gravedigger, this Berbalang. How about that, right? Pretty interesting stuff. Anyone there in the Philippines, maybe you might have some more information about this creature. It was something else I was going to mention too, but I might save it for later on. But it's apparently tied to the Aswang creature, something that I've talked about too in the past. So maybe if someone has more information on that link, post it below. One last thing too, a little bit of trivia. This creature has been featured in Dungeons and Dragons. So definitely it has its lore, not just within the Filipino culture, but now within mainstream media as well. Like when it comes to the pop culture associated with Dungeons and Dragons. Interesting stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.